My name's Sterling Crew and I'm Managing Director of a company called SQS. It's a consultancy business. I sit on the board of Camden BRI and on the board of a company called Shield Safety. So look, I've got to admit I'm a little bit nervous about speaking to you today, not just because there's so few of us, but I've just found out that actually food and drink business invite you to come and do a presentation twice in your career. Once on the way up and once on the way down. So thank you, Colin, for inviting me again. If you could, please. And the other thing is I got a call about a week ago to do the presentation. So that I worked out that not am I not first choice, not am I not second choice, I think I'm the third or fourth choice speaker. And I'm going to speak to you today about food safety culture and how to develop one and what the requirements are for an effective one. Can you go back a bit to the beginning? Back. So food safety culture is a really hot topic that's just recently got a lot hotter. But it's always been with us. So I've been in the business for 35 years. And we were doing food safety culture back then in manufacturing, but nobody called it culture. It wasn't a word that we really knew. And in fact, 8 years ago, when I started to talk about culture, most of the audience turned out to be microbiologists because they thought when you talked about culture, it was something to do with agar plates. And then second, when you're talking about culture and the benefits to manufacturing and retailing, is that people want to measure things. Shall I just do that? Yeah? And so the first thing they say is, right, I think I understand what food safety culture is, but how do I measure it? And there weren't really any tools. So everyone thought it was a great idea, food safety culture. And a lot of academic work had gone in to show how a lot of recent big serious incidents, actually the root cause was a poor safety culture. So now things have changed completely. I think people know what food safety culture is. And because of the work of BRC, suddenly it's become an imperative. Next slide, please. So what is it? Well, it's not about agar plates. The GFSI have just had a really simple explanation of it. I mean, the one that I developed 8 years ago was almost like a page of A4 long. That shows you my culture wasn't a simple one. And what the GFSI say is that shared values, beliefs and norms that often affect the mindset and behaviour towards food safety in and across and throughout an organisation. But really simply put, common sense tells you a culture in a business is the unwritten rules to working together. And it's how we do things around here. And I remember when I first started to do this about 8 years ago, I used to speak to some manufacturers and used to say, well, do you do food safety culture? And they said, no, we don't do food safety culture. But of course, everybody does food safety culture, whether they know it or not. And everyone has a food safety culture, whether it's a good one or a bad one, everybody has one. Thank you. I've noticed that people are sitting away from the front seats. Is that because I'm unsteady on my feet? I do tend to fall that way. So if I go, thank you, Colin. I think you're all safe. You might be in problems. So I think we all have a food safety management system. And we need to learn the lessons about how behavioural science can impact upon that. Because the number one objective for any food safety professional must be to inoculate a positive food safety culture into their organisation. And in fact, some research carried out by Camden last year where they talk up to their members about what's the most important thing with you, food safety culture came surprisingly top of the whole list. And it's the ability to inoculate that culture in a practical way in a business that I think is the big challenge. Because as I say, I've been doing this job for 35 years and it's taken me all this time to realise, really, safe people generate safe food. And no matter how sophisticated your processes are and your plant is and your management systems, if the people aren't right, you're into a losing wicket straight away. So things have changed. So the BRC Global Standard for Food Safety, Issue 8, came out for a review last month, in August, and is due to be implemented in audits in February. So you're all aware about the GFSI standard, and you know how critical it has become to the food supply chain. I mean, it's an absolute requirement for any retailer that your plant is accredited to BRC. And as a manufacturer, I ensured that all my suppliers had it as well. So it is actually a barrier to entry for any business. So safety and quality is a barrier to entry. And this simple certification process is a way of giving your your suppliers confidence. So there's a new section. It's saying that the site shall have a documented strategic plan for the development and continuing improvement of food safety and quality culture. So you have to be able to give the order to something. And that includes defined activities involving all sections of the country. So actually, what are you doing to improve your culture and how are you identifying it? You need an action plan indicating how the activities will be undertaken and their intended timescales. And you have to review the effectiveness of the completed system. So it's got to be a continuous improvement system, continuously being reviewed. So that's the first time people are being faced with that. And a lot of people still don't have the tools to deal with that. The great news is the GFSI have done, their working party has done a great toolbox. Look, we could spend a whole 2 or 3 hours going through their toolbox, but what it covers is 5 dimensions. And none of this will be kind of a surprise to you. I'm sure if we close the doors, if we had them in this room, and said, right, let's try to work out what the key components of food safety culture, we're going to come up with this in about an hour. Yeah, a lot of it is about the vision and the mission. It's how you communicate it through the business. It's about leadership, showing the way. A lot of it is about, obviously, the people themselves. It's about the behavior and activities. It's about being consistent, an effective application of your system. Food safety culture is not one thing you do for a BRC audit, right, we've done it, now we'll wait till next year. You've got to live the culture. Adaptability, cultures change because situations change, so your culture's got to be robust and able to adapt. And it's also, you've got to be aware of hazard and risk and how it falls into your HACCP program. Yeah, so what I'm advocating is that what we all need is a behavior-driven SMS, food safety management system, and it's just another tool that we put in our toolbox. Yeah, so we've got HACCP, we have our audits, we have PRP programs, we have in-process control, we have training, and food safety culture and the work behind it is just another tool that you can apply in that toolbox to assure safety. Go back one. So look, I think behavioural science is a great thing to get into. Health and safety people have been doing this for years. They realise how important it is to affect people's behaviour. And one of the concerns I think we have with our industry is that you train people, you tick the box, and then that's where it stops, largely. And I'm a great advocate that actually food safety training can give you a full sense of security. You think, well, I've trained these people, they're going to go away and do what they're told. That's not how it works, yeah? People don't behave in that way. But some of the terms that people use, so if you talk to a behavioural scientist, they say optimistic bias. So I didn't know what that was, but if you translate it into English, it means it will not happen to me. And how many times have we seen that? It's something that happens to somebody else, so I don't have to do it. There's an illusion of control. The most dangerous thing for anyone working in the food business is you begin to think you know what you're doing, and therefore you can't make a mistake. There's cognitive dissonance. They're great words, these, aren't they? I'm doing wrong, but I have a reason for doing wrong. It's like, if you take something as simple as Food Safety 101, you have to wash your hands. How many times do I stop people who haven't washed their hands? Not one person has ever said to me, I wasn't educated. Not one person said, I know it's a wrong thing to do. They always come up with one of these reasons. Cognitive dissonance. Sorry, I've got to hand this to an engineer. I've got to run here in a hurry. They'll come up with 100 reasons, really good reasons, why they shouldn't wash their hands. And probably the key one is what I think is attitudinal ambivalence. That they're always more important matters. And when you're in manufacturing, it's a tough world, it's fast moving, things have got to come at you from all angles, And there's always something more important to do than food safety. But if you ask somebody, what's the most important part of your job? Everybody says that the food must be safe. But actually, to behave that way, very few people do. Next one. So, a wash hand basin, which you stick at the beginning of your factory in the kitchen. So as you walk into it, you have to wash your hands, and it's open so everyone can see it. And how many times have people say, but I wash my hands in the toilet? But you can use behavioural dynamics by setting scenes up to encourage people to adopt the right behaviour and the right culture. So look, I'm a big ugly guy, and now I've got weapons, sticks. So if I stand right here as people are walking the factory, we had over 2,000 people working in the factory that I managed. How many of those people didn't wash their hands? I looked them all in the eye. How many do you think? Every person washed their hands. So if I walk to the other side of the factory and I hide behind one of the silos so no one can see me, what's the rate then? I mean, it goes down dramatically, like 60 or 70%, because their behaviour is being driven by me looming over them. But real food safety, real culture behaviour is happens when you're not there and they're left to their own devices. So do you go into many women's toilets and men's toilets in factories? They're different, aren't they? So the problem that you've got in culture and behaviour is how many women admit to not washing their hands when they go to the toilet? Actually admit it. 45%. How many men admit, when asked the question, do you wash your hands after going to the toilet? How many men? Lower or higher? Higher, a lot higher. About 76%. So you've already got people bringing their own behaviour into a factory. If they're not going to wash their hands at home, where they've got kids which they might pass on diseases to, why would they wash it in a factory? So you have to acknowledge something even as simple as, surely that must be the easiest job for anybody, is getting someone to wash their hands, illustrates how critical it is, and the consequences can be dire. Diarrhea, actually. Next slide. And then we live in a global food safety system, don't we? Supply chains now go across the whole world, and you have to be cognizant of people's own individual cultures in those countries. I started life off in M&S, and I was sent to France, developed this fantastic cooked chill product. It was absolutely beautiful. I thought my career is going to be made here. And what I learned in France very quickly is I can't speak French. I have a smattering of schoolboy French. If you talk to a Frenchman straight away in English, their culture comes up. You know, if you're not going to bother to learn my language and speak part of my language, I'm not going to speak to you. But if you make a small attempt to use your French, and they laugh at you, I don't know if a table is male or female, I never could understand that. They'd laugh at you, but at least they'd help you. And I went round this factory, the technical manager showed me around, it was really, really, really professional. The product was fantastic. It was a beautiful factory, and I thought, I can go back to M&S, and my career's almost made. And so we come to the end of the factory tour, and there was a big door open in the warehouse. So I'm speaking to this technical manager, a little bit of French, a little bit of English. And I just said to her, shut the door. And she looked at me a bit strange. I thought it's a bit odd. I'm just saying, look, there's all this dust blowing into the factory. It can't be good. So I said again to her, shut the door. And I swear to you, she took a step back. And I'm thinking, look, come on, this is basic food safety. I'm not asking anything reasonable. So I said again, shut the door. And her face was like horrified. So I tried my French. Fermez la porte, s'il vous plaît, mademoiselle. And she burst out laughing. What she thought I said wasn't shut the door, but je t'adore, which in French means I love you. So I'm saying to this woman, I love you. I love you. I love you. And she's getting more and more horrified. So understanding people's cultures is really important, but it can get you into trouble if you don't really, really understand it. Next. So, look, we could talk about delivering a food safety culture for a long time about some of the techniques involved, But if I was to sum it up, it's all about leadership. It starts from the top. It's the standards you start at the top that filter through to everyone. So if you're not consistent and say, look, food safety is important, but today we need to change the date codes, just for today, because we have another issue with supply, your leadership has got a big problem because you're inconsistent. You've got to have the same standards for all employees, and that's how you build employee confidence. You've got to demonstrate that you understand what you're trying to do, that you're walking the walk, and that people need to be accountable. You know, you must be great at communicating what the culture's about. So remember, leadership starts from the top, one standard. Please. So is there someone very, very important who visits your factory, and your standard is, well, you have to wear PPE and everyone has to have a hairnet, and your very important visitor decides, no, I don't want to muscle my hair up. You can imagine the impact on that factory. No, I have to wash my hands, I have to wear this stupid hairnet, I have to wear my coat. But when someone important comes in, then suddenly it's not an important issue. So consistency, you can't say it's more important than that. Thank you. So, food safety culture, delivering a food safety culture. Food safety is really what happens when you're not there. So if you're standing them over them as a professional, people will always do the right thing if you've trained them. But if it's a night shift, there's no senior managers around, that's when your culture kicks in. And there's a continuum, I think, with food safety culture, and you need to understand where you are on it. Are you good or are you bad? And in the GFSI toolbox, there's quite a good continuum tool to give you a clue about where you are. And I'm sure we could all list what the good things are and what the bad things are. And we know organisations that have lack of leadership or flexible morals, and we know organisations where integrity is really important and the leadership really lead. But you get a great halo effect from that. I think once you're developing a positive food safety culture, it's a positive health and safety culture, it's a positive environmental culture, it's a positive relationship you're building up with your workforce. And the dire side of culture getting wrong, as we've seen what happens with public recalls, the horse meat scandal that's still reverberating around our industry, consumer trust is still a very fragile thing, and VW's defeat system is the most remarkable story I've ever heard. The Germans, who whenever I've worked with them have shown such integrity, you know, are so process-driven, that the culture in the business was, make sure we can get these cars into the American market. And all the values about safety were just disappeared, and it was all about, hey, we've got to succeed. So, a few warnings as I sum up. Training on its own can give a false sense of security. Just because you've trained someone does not mean you've created the right sense of culture. It's the follow-up. It's understanding what drives people's behaviour. If training doesn't drive positive behavioural change, it's a waste of time. You've wasted your money, you've wasted the time. So you have to be auditing, can the behaviour stand up to a challenge? Next, please. So, developing a food safety culture. I always think priorities change depending on the circumstances and pressures, yeah? So some big manufacturing issue happens or some big supply issue happens, priorities will change. You know, you'll go to try to solve the problem. But values do not. And if your company has very, very strong values, it will not put safety at risk. If its values are a bit more flexible or has very poor values, I think you're on to a loser straight away. And in summation, I'm told that you have to put an iceberg slide in for every presentation, what you're doing. Even if you've got a holiday presentation, because it's supposed to illustrate the issue. And I think with food safety culture, in most organisations, wherever you are on the global food supply chain, I think you only see the tip of the iceberg of your organisation. And I think in the past, certainly that's so. And underneath is really what's happening in the company, which is invisible to most senior managers. And I think it's cognizant upon all of us to promote food safety culture, to understand it, and to really delve into what really is the safety culture of your organisation. Shall I show you a bit of behavioural science to show you how powerful this is in summation? Will you all stand up? I know it's late in the day. So I'm going to pick out a fraudster, yeah? So this is understanding how human behaviour works, and it's about understanding behavioural characteristics. So I'm going to tell you who in this room is the most likely person to commit food fraud. So if you're a woman, please sit down. So if you look at all the fraud cases, women are hardly ever involved. I don't know why that is. But my wife says more integrity, more intelligence. She wrote me a whole A4 side of paper about why women are better than men. Right, so if you're under 35, sit down. Yeah. So younger people don't commit so much fraud. If you're in a permanent job, stand up, but if you're in a temporary job, sit down. Temporary people sit down. If you've been in your organisation for less than 5 years, sit down. Oh dear, rather more than I thought. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are your fraudsters. So if you look at behavioural science, please sit down, gentlemen. If you look at behavioural science and dynamics, you just use it to pick out who the people to keep an eye on. So my wife always says, well, just employ more women and your problem's solved. Thank you very much for your time. It's been most appreciated. Thank you.
Great.